Welcome to Rico 12. I'm Justin B., your host and a child of an all-powerful and perfectly loving God and an addict living in the miracle of recovery one day at a time. Rico 12 is all about exploring the common threads of addiction and sharing tools and hope from those on a similar path. We gather from diverse backgrounds, faiths, and places to learn and support one another. Our speakers are members of various fellowships, representing lots of addictions or afflictions, thus showing the common threads of recovery no matter our addiction or affliction. I want to take just a minute and thank Silvio D. for stepping in and hosting last week as I was unavailable to be here. He always does an amazing job. And if you haven't ever checked out his podcast that he does called 12 Steps and 12 Questions, you really need to check it out. He is an amazing interviewer. Thanks again, Silvio. Today's meeting is number 308 of the Rico 12 speaker meeting series. And today's speaker is Patt O, a first-time speaker here on Rico 12. The topic he sent to me this week was Step 1. And I look forward to hearing that message here in just a few minutes. But first, for a little bit of business. Rico 12 has several recovery resources in our family of podcasts and social media communities. To learn more, listen more, connect more, or just hang out and learn and grow with us, you can check out the other podcasts that you can find at reco12.com. That's reco12.com. I'll also put the links here in the chat and also in the show notes of the podcast. Rico 12 is self-supporting, and your contributions help us continue our mission. Thanks to all of our spearheads, past, present, and future. And a special thanks this last week to Sarah, Vivian, Nigel, Catherine, and Victoria. Thank you so much for your generous donations. If you out there also feel the desire to become a spearhead and support this cause, please visit reco12.com/support or click on the links that I'll put in the chat and the show notes for one-time or monthly donation options. Your support, not just financially, but with your word of mouth, makes a difference in keeping us able to share these messages of recovery. We look forward each meeting to receiving from the light reflected from our speakers. That light inspires hope, meaning, worth, and growth in us, the listening audience. Now I'm going to introduce our guest speaker for today, Patt O, and give a little background on him. When Patt was 11 months old, he came into the room of Alcoholics Anonymous with his mom, who was either going to go to AA or prison for 10 years. Growing up in the rooms was not enough to keep Patt sober. His journey of alcoholism and addiction took him to Skid Row. Patt knew he was dying from, but didn't understand what alcoholism was. Today, as a result of a spiritual awakening, Patt is a free man. Take it away, Patt. The floor is yours.
I appreciate it, Justin. My name is Pat. I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. Hi, Pat. And it's always weird and awkward when you're talking to the Hollywood Squares or the wherever we're located, Indiana. Good to see you. And man, what an honor and a privilege. Thank you, brother, for asking. We don't know each other, but it's like we've been family for years, you know. And that's the one thing about alcoholism and drug addiction is that whenever I'm amongst you, I know that I'm home. I always tell newcomers, welcome to our big dysfunctional family, you know. And man, I'm grateful to be here. I didn't even realize or remember what I was doing. I just said yes. And I showed up, you know, and I believe in my experience is that when I say yes and I show up, that's where God wants me to be. And if you're new and listening to this and you're struggling with the idea of God, I totally relate 100%. I didn't believe in God until I was 10 years sober. And I say that out loud because you can stay sober, you know, without a belief. You know, I just continued to do what was in front of me and did the 12 steps of whatever fellowship I fell into, which I'll talk about. But I'm a drug addict through and through. I thought that alcoholism and addiction was about consequences. And growing up, I grew up in Alcoholics Anonymous. My mom was going to prison for 10 years or go to AA. And in the middle of the sentencing, the judge is like, you should go to AA, you idiot. Stop thinking about it, you know. There's a line in the literature that says to live by spiritual principles or die an alcoholic death. This isn't an easy choice for us. And she stood there and she thought about it, you know, and she came to AA. And I grew up in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I grew up at the Canyon Club in Laguna Beach, California, which I just happened to be sitting in front of today, which is which is really cool. I mean, it's like really cool. But like I grew up. I knew the literature. I could recite chapter 5. I even held hands. I was like, keep coming back. The old timers were like, we're saving this seat right here for you, kid. I didn't know what they meant. I didn't know nothing and nothing. But when I was in my disease, because my mom went to Al-Anon, which really sucks, because you call and ask for money and mom's like, no. I'm like, no, what do you mean no? She's like, no's a full sentence. And I'm like, F you, mom, and I'm like, well, mom, if I only had a dad, I wouldn't be in this situation. It's all your fault. And I hit that guilt button and my mom would wire me the money. Or I'd call her and tell her, I'm getting a job, and she'd say, just go to AA and then I'll give you the money. So I go to the AA meeting and I'd say, my name is Pat and I'm an addict. No, not there. You're not, what I mean? They're like, oh, there's an addict in our rooms. Get him out of here, And I didn't know that I was dying of alcoholism. I really didn't. Like, I did not know what I was dying from. I just knew that I was a bad person, right? I knew that that the things that I did weren't aligning with what I was raised with, what I was grown to be. Like I was raised to be a loving, kind. I mean, the rooms of fellowship, right? Like the spiritual principles that were taught was what I was raised with, and so I was in and out and in and out. When I got sober on the 23rd of October of 2002, clean and sober on the October 23rd, 2002, I came off a Skid Row. I was 98 pounds. I hadn't showered in 6 months. I had 2 shoes, only one had a sole. The other one was just like flopping around. I thought my importance in life was that I thought that I was an antenna and I was communicating with the aliens. I was like channeling really important information that no one knew. And you needed me to get this underlying message that was being told by the aliens to us Earth folks, and I just stood, I just was like, and I was in methamphetamine psychosis, very schizoaffective behaviors, voices in my head. They told me where to go, full-blown visual, the devil and his troops. They followed me wherever I went. And methamphetamine had a serious hold on me. Crack cocaine had a serious hold on me. I would shoot heroin in order to like come down, and drugs were definitely a problem. And the only time that I would get any bit of silence was when I went to jail. You know what I mean? They would send me to jail, and for not really silence, because I have a disease of the mind, But once the psychosis would eliminate, once they can get me on enough medication for the psychosis to eliminate, I start having that little voice in my head. And I don't know, like but my little voice is like, Pat, methamphetamine's really bad. You know what I mean? Like, don't do meth. You're going to end up like that. You don't want to end up like that again. Or I would come off the heroin physically and I'd be like, don't do heroin again because, you're going to have to kick again. But my little mind was like, you know what, Pat, alcohol isn't that bad. I mean, you could go to the bar and have a couple beers with your friends, or you know what I mean, your girlfriend's coming to pick you up. It's all right to have a couple drinks with her. And then I start to minimize any kind of consequences that are a result of my addiction. Right? I start to realize that if you just drink alcohol, like you won't end up on the streets. You know what I mean? If you just drink alcohol, you won't end up back in jail, though I already had a DUI. Though I had a DUI that I didn't show up for probation for, which then became a warrant, which then threw me back in jail over and over and over. But I don't see those things, right? I don't see the consequences of my alcoholism because the consequences of my disease were around the fact that I got a heroin possession, around the fact that methamphetamine was causing me psychosis, right? And so I get out of the jail, right? And I go to the 7-Eleven right here in Orange County. It's a set that's, I hope I make it there before they close. And I get, right? And that's what the mind is like, you better get there before 2, right? Not knowing that alcohol is a problem, even though I'm like obsessed with the fact that I need to make sure the liquor store is open for me to get that alcohol. And I get the 12-pack of beer and I drink 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh my God. Next thing you know, I forgot that the girlfriend was picking me up. and I start walking down the street. You know what I mean? I like take a walk into the neighborhood, and the neighborhoods around jails aren't always that good. And I meet a new friend, and before you know it, we're like, we got a drug empire and we're selling drugs and we're gonna rule the world. And back on the crack cocaine, back on the methamphetamine, back to shooting heroin just in order to like come down a little bit. And then the next thing you know, man, I'm back in jail. And I'm like, dude, what the heck happened here? Like, that wasn't part of the plan. But this time I got busted for a little crack cocaine. So now the consequences around my crack cocaine, right? And I'm not going to do crack, and I'm not going to do the meth anymore. But I clean up my mind. The psychosis goes away, and I'm sitting in jail. And that little voice is like, you know what? Crack cocaine was bad. You know what I mean? Shouldn't do crack cocaine, but you can drink alcohol. Alcohol's not a problem. And so I do. I'm sitting there and I'm obsessed, sitting in there in the holding tank. I'm obsessed with alcohol, right? I've sworn off crack cocaine. The methamphetamine's kind of sneaking its way back in. I forgot that I swore that one off last time, and I'm thinking and I'm justifying, I'm rationalizing and I'm minimizing how alcohol is a good idea. And I'm just, man, I hope I make it to 7-Eleven in time. And I get to that 7-Eleven, I get the 12-pack of beer, 1 beer, 2 beer, 3 beer, 4 beer. I wonder what they're doing down the street. I forget my girlfriend's coming to pick me up. Next thing you know, man, I don't know, a week later, 2 weeks later, I'm back in jail. And I'm like, what the heck happened here? Like that wasn't part of the plan. And now my mom's coming to see me. My mom's, I don't know, 20 years sober, and she's looking at me in that glass window, man, with that disappointment, with that look of like, how could you have done it again? You promised me you weren't going to drink and use, right? Because she's got her own stuff. She hadn't gone to Al-Anon yet, right? She could see it in her own life, but she couldn't see it in hers, right? She was in the middle of her first step, getting the crud beat out of her for my alcoholism, right? My mom would rationalize and justify and minimize my behavior all day long, and I'd make that promise, Mom, man, this time's going to be different. And she'd say, just go to a 12-step fellowship in there. And I would go to the H&I, and those that do H&I, thank you. You give me hope. I would hear your stories and I would think, man, maybe one day I could be like those guys, and you dress nice. And I thought, man, you guys had it together, And, but there was a part of me that knew, man, I was never going to have it together. I already started to see my powerlessness sitting in those jails, knowing that I wasn't going to be one of you guys in recovery, and so every drug was always a problem, man. Alcohol was never a problem in my life. And so what happened was, I ended up going to treatment. I went to Betty Ford in Palm Springs. And when I went to Betty Ford, I thought I had, I had just gotten fired from a job I had. I was the assistant director at an after school elementary school program, 45 days clean and sober. And 3 days into that job, the second day, this little second grader introduced me to his mom as his best friend. And I was like 47 days clean and sober. And that third day, I was pushing that kid on a swing, and I had an idea that a bag of heroin and a pint of tequila would be a good idea. And I called the Connect, and he brought a bag of heroin and a syringe, and I went to that elementary school bathroom where those kids were running in and out of, and I shot heroin, and I nodded out in that toilet. And I came to, and that second grader was crying, and he had gotten the director of the camp because he found me on that toilet, nodded out. And I hope I never forget the shame and the guilt that I felt that day. I hope I never forget the look on that little boy's face when I was walking off of that elementary school campus, man. And him crying, saying, Pat, I hope to see you again. For the first time in my life, I could see how my behavior affected the loved ones around me. Why was it that little boy that I known for 3 days? It wasn't my mom that came and see me in that jail cell, right? Because I still had a resentment towards my mom. I still had a resentment towards AA because you guys took my mom from me. I wasn't going to AA because you guys took my mom from me when I was a little kid. Now, I know today I've done enough work to know that like my mom needed to put AA first in order for me to have a mom. Like I know that today, but I didn't know that at 10, 11 years old. I didn't know that when my mom was speaking all over the country that that's what she needed to do, you know? I didn't know nothing, man. And so I always had my finger. But that day, man, that little boy changed my life. And I didn't get sober for a year, 2 years later. But when I went to treatment that day, um, my heroin use was the consequence. Heroin's the reason why I went to treatment. And so I got out of treatment and I went to sober living because my girlfriend in treatment, that's where she wanted to go. And I had turned my will and life over to her as I understood God. And I made a clear decision, and she wanted to go to Hawaii. And I was like, let's go to Hawaii and go to sober living together. And I got on the plane, and the flight attendant asked me, what do you want to drink? Well, if you're a heroin addict, you can drink alcohol. And so she brought me a Heineken, and 12 or 13 Heinekens later, I land in Hawaii. Now, the old timers used to say things like, it's the first drink that gets you drunk, kid, you know? And I would be like, you need to drink through that, old man. If you're drunk at one beer, man, you got issues, bro. You need AA, you know? And, but that day when I got off the plane, I knew exactly what those old timers were talking about. I knew exactly that it was that first Heineken that I ordered, man, that I had the inability to, once I put alcohol into my body, I couldn't stop. And it took me another, I don't know, year and a half till I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. That's when my mom started to go to Al-Anon. That's when the language changed. That's when things started changing in my life. Al-Anon saved my life. Thank God for Al-Anon, man. I hated y'all then, but I love you today, you know, because my mom stopped wiring me the money, you know, and my mom got me a plane ticket back to Los Angeles, and I got off that plane, and I went straight downtown to Skid Row. And I survived Skid Row for a year and a half. I hope I never forget the shame and the guilt, man. I hope I never forget the incomprehensible, demoralizing things that I had done for crack cocaine. I would wander up to West Hollywood and go into those gay bars and flirt with enough men to get enough alcohol and drugs in my body and hope that I make it out before I black out. And as a straight man, I start coming to doing things that I didn't plan on set on doing. And on the 20th of October of 2002, I crawled out of a motel one more time. That morning, man, I had no fight left in me. You know, and in our literature, it says some of us make that supreme sacrifice rather than continue to fight. And that day, I set off to make that supreme sacrifice, and that was to jump in front of a box truck at 5:30 in the morning, and I was on Santa Monica Boulevard, and I'm about to jump in front of this truck when the thought crosses my mind that a pint of tequila would be a better idea. And my whole body shifted from one direction, and it moved to the other direction, and I walked to that liquor store. And one more time, alcohol saved my life. One more time, alcohol saved my life. And I'll never forget the 30 minutes and the madness of that terror waiting for that liquor store to open. I'll never forget the voices screaming in my head, what a loser, a piece of shit I am, failure, you've never been good at nothing, you've hurt everybody in your life. Never forget the anxiety. I'm about to snap out of my skin, man. I can't handle this anymore, you know? The lady opened that liquor store. Immediately, I got the sense of ease and comfort at once, man. Just knowing that I was walking in that liquor store. I got that pint of tequila. I went on that wall I was sitting at. I put out that bottle back, and all that fear and all that shame and all that guilt went away just like that. And that restless, irritable, and discontent, man, just gone. And I start having that conversation with myself. And I don't know what like your conversation is, but my conversation always is this time's going to be different, Pat. This time you're gonna make it right with your mom, and this time you're gonna go back and you're gonna get that job, and you're gonna go get the girlfriend back. You're gonna right, and I have all these grandiose ideas of what I'm gonna do, I don't realize that I'm on Skid Row. I don't realize that I haven't showered in 6 months. I don't realize that I don't have a place to live, that I'm in and out of a cardboard box. Some days I had a tent, Most times I'm in a cardboard box. I don't realize that, right? Alcohol gives me that fierce determination that I can go out and live this thing called life one more time. And in the middle of that conversation, the voice tells me to drink that second half of that bottle. And I drank that second half of that bottle, and I blacked out for 3 more days. And I came to 3 days later. I'm doing the exact same thing I did day in and day out for one more hit of crack cocaine. And that morning, man, I know today, that morning, man, I had a spiritual defense that stepped in between me and that first thought of that first drink. Because I came to and I was going to kill myself. And the next voice said, call your mom and ask for help. And I picked up the phone and I called my mom and I asked for help. Though I didn't believe in God until I was 10 years sober, I can tell you God heard that prayer. Mom, please help. God heard that prayer. It was a please help with no plan behind that help. And I know that today, that when I called and asked for help, God heard that prayer, but I walked into God's grace. Because my mom called every high-profile old-timer in her area to help her kid, and none of them answered. And the guy that answered had a year's sobriety. He was on fire for Alcoholics Anonymous, and he had just gotten off the phone with this doctor that told him he had stage 4 cancer and he had 6 months to live. And that guy knew if he didn't treat his alcoholism, he wasn't going to make it 6 months. He didn't say, have the kid call me. He said, where's he at? He was so terrified he was going to drink that he knew that he needed to get into service work. And he picked up a new guy, because we don't do 12-step calls alone. And they barged in that motel that day, dude. And the guy had crazy hair. He was loud, obnoxious. His name's Jack Orris, man. That man just passed away last month or about a month ago because of cancer. But Jack Orris, man, he barged in the front door that day and he said, my name's Jack and I'm an alcoholic. And this other old guy, he had a walker, dude. He was like, my name's John. I got 90 days sober, And I'm just sitting there, man. That the main problem of the alcoholic centers in the mind, man. My whole life, I've separated myself from you. If I only had a dad, I know how to be a friend to you. If I only had a dad, I know how to be a boyfriend to you. If I only had a dad, I know how to go to work. It's always my mom's fault. It's always my dad's fault, man. And that day, man, I was sitting there thinking, these guys are losers, man. Man, these guys, these old crusty old dudes, man, this dude's about to die. He needs AA. I didn't say that. I'm thinking it. You know what I'm saying? I'm thinking it. I'm not saying it. I'm thinking it. And this is how I know I walked into God's grace, because that guy, Jack, said, come with me, kid. I didn't ask where we were going. I didn't say the things that were in my head. There was no fight in me. I got up and I followed that guy to that motel. And I got to the van and he goes, just get in the van, kid. And I got in the van. And if you're new, just get in the car. Maybe it might be a van for you too. Just get in the van, get in the car, get in the Zoom vehicle, whatever it is. When someone says, meet me at the Zoom meeting, get in the van, get in the car, get in the Zoom car, and show up to the Zoom meeting. Because what happened was like when I got into that van, those guys told me their stories. And thank God we're a storytelling society. Thank God Justin invited me to come tell you my story. I don't know why God wants me here today. I just said yes. I got in the Zoom van and I showed up to the Zoom meeting. I know that the spirit in the story punctured the ego enough to penetrate the spirit within. I didn't relate to those guys, but I knew that those guys knew of where I had been. I knew they thought the way I thought. I knew they felt the way I felt. Those guys gave me hope in that car ride, in that van ride. And before he knew it, I ended up at a place called Charlie Street, low bottom, indigent detox. Man, no therapist to talk about my feelings. You know what I mean? It was like, sit down, shut the F up. We don't want what you have. If you want what we have, you'll do what we do. You know what I mean? And I'm like, well, what is it that you do? They said, here's a broom, go sweep. You know what I mean? I was like, all right. And I'm sweeping. You know what I mean? I'm sweeping over there. And then there's another guy sweeping. And that guy goes, hey, what's your name? I'm like, I'm Pat. I was so self-centered. I didn't even ask him his name, And later on that day, I don't know, that guy, I didn't know he was my sponsor guy, but he said, I want you to go wash dishes. I go wash dishes, and there's that guy that asked me my name. He goes, hey, Pat, how you doing? And I remember what it felt like that dude remembered my name. And so I told him all my problems that I had. I pigeonholed him for like 3 hours, telling him all my woes, and he goes, hey, my name's John, by the way. I know you're not going to ask. I'm John. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, John. And then later on, I'm being a service, and there's John, service junkie John, and John remembered all my problems. And I remember what it felt like that someone remembered all my problems. Man, service connected me to you. There's a line in our literature somewhere. I know where it is, but I'm not going to tell you. You got to go ask your sponsor where it is. But it says that our real problem is an inability to form a true bond with another human being. Not much hope there. You know what I mean? When I started off and said, welcome to our big dysfunctional family, thank God for principles before personalities. Thank God for the 10th step to continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear when these crop up, which means these are going to crop up. Guess what? It says we say a prayer. We talk to somebody, we make amends if necessary, then we turn our thoughts and attentions to who we can help. In the fear inventory somewhere in the literature, go look for it, but it says we ask God to remove the fear, we ask God what he would have us be, and then we go out and we let him demonstrate through us. This is a design for living, but I wasn't going to be able to accept the design for living laid out in the literature if I didn't do an honest first step. Right? Because if I'm not powerless, then I don't need to access power. And if I don't need to access power, I'm not going to do step 2. And if I'm not going to do step 2, I'm not going to make a decision to turn my life over to something I haven't even found in step 2 yet. But the best part of step 2 for me says we cannot even comprehend or define what that power is, which means I'm in a continual seeking mission to continue to seek this power within this moment. Faith for me is a confident trust born of experience. I have enough experience laid out that the problems I'm going through right now in my life, it's going to work out. And every time it's actually worked out to be better. I came from Skid Row. Today, I have a place to live. I'm a little resentful because I ordered a new couch, Cadillac problem. But what my resentment is they were supposed to deliver it yesterday. Well, guess what? I moved the couch out. I moved all the furniture. I got nothing. And then I'm like, where's my text to tell me when the delivery is going to come? It didn't come, but I'm spiritual and I'm patient. And I'm like, God has a plan. Well, I was like, I don't think they're going to deliver it. So I show up to the furniture store. They go, oh, there was a financial hold on your thing. I'm like, what do you mean financial hold? My bank here says, and I'm telling them, I'm laying into them. I'm telling them, no, you took the money. Where's my couch? Well, we'll deliver it on the 26th. I'm thinking I'm going to have no couch till the 26th. Well, anyways, I do have a place to live. I got to get some milk crates. I'm going to send it. I'm going to post it on their thing. I'm sleeping on milk crates. Not just kidding. I won't do that. But I thought it. You know what I mean? I thought it. You know what I mean? Thank God we don't have to act on our thinking today. What a blessing. What a blessing. Cadillac problem. I'm going to meet a new guy right here. We're going to sit down and we're going to read the literature. 2 minutes, Justin. I got that. We're going to read the literature. You know what I mean? It ain't about me today. It's about you. It's about me identifying my alcoholism in hopes that a new person can find that they're powerless over drugs and alcohol, right? If you're powerless, if you can concede to your innermost self, man, what a gift. The greatest gift you gave me is the gift of identification. I identify with you, man. I sit in the room and no matter what it is I got going on, someone says, my name's Pat. I'm a drug addict and an alcoholic. And I go, me too. Me too. And then someone lays out, man, the solution that they're applying to their life today. And you give me hope. And you say, yeah, my problems are better than they were yesterday. I'm thinking, not mine, self-centered, not mine. But you give me hope that if I apply this solution, that me too, things will be better. And though it's a Cadillac problem, it had me for a little bit yesterday. It did, you know what I mean? I want my dang couch, 22 years ago, I wish I had a couch. 22 years ago, I wish I didn't lived in the cardboard box. I got a tent. I was like, yeah, I'm better than you in that cardboard box down there. You know what I'm saying? And man, today I can tell you that majority of the time, I don't have to be better or less than. I'm okay with being Pat O, and I'm okay being God's kid, and I can be okay being in the middle of you. My name's Pat. I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict, and I love you all. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pat. I love your energy. I love your message. Good stuff. I've written down several questions. We've gotten a few from our live audience here. And a reminder to the live audience, if you have a question for Pat, please type it in the chat. If you want to remain anonymous, send me a direct message. If you don't care that I read your first name, just send it to me in the chat. I'll get to it. But I'm going to start off here, Pat, with a question. I like you, identify that an anon saved me. And it was my wife. She was in the rooms for 8 years almost before I came into the rooms. And it wasn't, it was what it was like an attack at my pride. She said, you know what? God takes way better care of me than you do. And I was like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? This God doesn't help me. How does God help you? So talk to us a little bit about the power of the Al-Anon in your life that really did that, and why you said Al-Anon saved me.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Justin. Al-Anon saved me because my mom stopped enabling my disease. She kicked me out of the house at 17 years old. That's a lie. I thought she kicked me out of the house. She said, you can stay here and be sober, or go out on the streets and get loaded. You need to make a choice. And alcoholism and drug addiction told me I was kicked out. Right. And I put my hands on my mom and I slammed her against the wall. I told her, F you, I hate you, you're never going to see me again. And I can tell you that alcohol and drugs told me to do that because my mom was my hero and my mom was my best friend. But that was at 17. By the time I was 18 and a half, my mom's like, you're not going to live inside, but you can park your van on my driveway. You know what I mean? Well, and so hey, I'm not homeless. I'm still at home. I'm just on the driveway, and I can rationalize and minimize my disease. My mom would wire me $150. I called her a year. I didn't call my mom for a year and a half after she kicked me out. And I told her I got hit by a truck and I needed money, and my mom wired me $150 just like that. And I played my mom like a fiddle, man. My mom felt guilty. I played it. My mom needed love. I played it. And so what Alan did for my mom was it gave her the tools, gave her the tools that she didn't have to play into my disease. She started not giving me the money. She said, you know what? I wish, I would love to help you, but them people in the 12-step fellowship can help you. Good luck. I love you. And I'm like, oh my God, you love, that's not love. Yeah. Where's the we care sign, and I'd play that on her. I'd say, oh, I thought you care. You guys say that over there. You don't care about your kid, and just stop working. You know what I mean? The manipulation stopped working. The day that my mom said to me, when I called her that day, she said, I'm going to send someone from the fellowship to help you. I can't help you. She says, if I come and get you, I'm going to end up killing you. And she knew it. Like, that was her surrender to my disease, right? That was her surrender, where I was like, I'm going to end up killing you if I continue to help you, right? And she would tell me before she passed, she said, it was the hardest thing I had ever done. You know what I mean? It was to let somebody else help you. My mom died with 44 years sober, man. January 10th, 2019. She was very influential in drug and alcohol treatment in Orange County, 38 years. Like, my mom had all the resources, the tools, the education, right, to help anybody, but she was killing her son, and so that when she finally surrendered and was like, I can't do this anymore, my life changed, man. My life changed.
Beautiful story, and that's amazing. An amazing memorial, I guess, to your mom. Very cool. So here's a question from our live audience. This is from an anonymous member, and I love this too. You mentioned that you were 10 years sober before you believed in God. What was your higher power until you believed in God, and how did you source that power to stay sober and clean?
That's great. I appreciate that question. So when my that sponsor guy was like, he started talking about God, and I was like, oh, heck no, man. I ain't selling no literature door to door. You know what I mean? He had a Bill W. bobblehead, dude. That's what he was like, that guy. You know what I mean? He was like, God's the greatest thing in my life. And I was like, dude, lame. I was like, that's lame. Just to let you know, I have a bobblehead today of Bill W. You know what I mean? But he didn't try to convince me of his God. You know what I mean? He was like, the 12 steps. He said, the greatest gift the 12 steps gave me is when I walked my daughter down the aisle, I had joy for my daughter walking down the aisle. Like that was a power greater than myself, like joy for another human being. Like that made absolutely no sense, but it was something that I wanted. He said, oh yeah, every Saturday I watch my grandkids play baseball and I have happiness for my kids, like my grandkids. Like that was like so foreign to me, like happiness for others. Like I was so consumed with me. And so I came to believe in the 12 step process, right? I came to believe he was a big circle and triangle kind of guy. Recovery, unity, service, and recovery, right? He said the fellowship, like the legacy one, we need to get you plugged into the fellowship, right? And he would make me meet 5 new people at every meeting, and he would make me call those 5 people the next day. And he's like, no women, only men. He's like, they don't want what you have anyways, but I don't want you trying around the fellowship. And and he was big about that. And then after I started getting plugged in fellowship, he said, I want you to get a commitment. He said, you're a taker. I was like, what do you mean I'm a taker? And so then I got a commitment. I remember complaining about my home group, and he goes, do you have a commitment? I go, no. He goes, get a commitment. And then next month he goes, how you feel? I love my home group, but he got me a service commitment, and then he started taking me through the 12 steps. And I didn't buy into the, like, higher power. I knew it was word games. He was trying to trick me. He's like, I want you to go to the ocean and go try to stop a wave and then tell me about it. And I'm like, come on, bro, that's the lamest thing I've heard. Like, that's really not, because I'm an intellect, you know what I'm saying? I'm a smart guy. You know what I mean? Thank God that a loving God and my thinking align most of the time today, as long as I continue to practice the deal. But so for all those years, like I was a service junkie, and I believed in AA. I mean, I was like, I had like 20 guys I sponsored. They say the guy with the most sponsees is the sickest in the room. That's me. But I did. I try to manage everyone's life. I try to tell them what they had to do, where they had to go. But I was a big AA guy. I was on a lot of service committees, all that kind of stuff. And so all of that stuff was good, but it didn't have the legs. And I can tell you that if I had more time and we talked about other things, I had a lot of relationship issues. I'm a cheater. I haven't been in 12 years, but up until that point, at 8 years sober, I was going to kill myself. And I didn't have a God in my life, and I was holding a secret. I told you my secret today in my story, but I couldn't tell another human being that, and it almost killed me. It almost killed me. And so AA, finally, at a certain point, when the intellect is no more, the book says there will be no more analyzing, right? You know what I mean? When the in the last analysis is actually what it says, but it says in the last analysis, that's where God is found, and so it was a lot of ego breaking down. My God was what you guys thought of me, in the fellowship. I was super service guy, was like, popular guy, I sponsor a lot of guys, and that ego, right, eventually, shattered, and I was left with no other option but to seek within myself with what God was. I had to write a list of the things that were blocking me from God, what you guys thought of me in the fellowship, all kinds of things, power, money, control, and I said a prayer, God, please take away these things that stand in the way of me having a better relationship with you. And for 3 months, man, I battled this list for 3 months. I was like, I'm not letting go. I'm like, analyze. And in that analyzing space, man, in the darkest of, I was suicidal from 8 to 10 years sober. Like I'm talking like some serious ego deflating stuff, and like very super spiritual space. But I came to see that God was love. The thing that I was so afraid of, man, was letting you love me. I could give love, but letting you love me, right? And man, I remember crossing off that thing of what you guys thought of me in the fellowship, and the last thing on the list was God. And I just broke. I started to cry, man. I just was like broke, man, shattered. I've had intuition my whole life, man.
Beautiful.
So
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. So, next question from an anonymous attendee. Can you describe your daily practice of steps 10 and 11? What does that look like in your life today, Pat?
That's great. So I can tell you a 10, I was on the way here. You know, I was driving. I drove, I don't know, it's like 30 miles. And a guy cut me off. And I've been doing this no road rage, Pat, no road rage, Pat. No, I'm not a road rager. Like I'm an antagonizer. You know what I mean? If you're like riding I'll like give you a little brake check. You know what I mean? I'll antagonize it. But like today it was like, Pat, take a deep breath, say a prayer. I called my sponsor. I was like, I want to brake check this guy. I didn't know an amends because I hadn't brake checked him yet. And I picked up the phone and I called the guy's sponsor and I was like, yo, how's your life going? He's like, it's horrible, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, all right. And pretty soon I totally forgot I was going to brake check this guy. Active step 10, you know? And as long as I'm doing a step 10, dude, at night when I go to bed, it's a peaceful head, right? If I have a resentment that I didn't do a practice step 10 throughout the day, guess what? At nighttime, it's going to be eating my lunch, dude. It's going to be talking, you know what I mean? F that guy. And I know it's actually in 11, in the literature I read, it's in 11. It says when we retire at night, here's a list of things, you know what I mean? And I can do that little list of things. But if I don't do a 10 and I don't do an 11 at night when my lunch is being eaten, when I wake up in the morning, guess what's going to be on the table? That SHIT pile from the day before is going to be there. And how am I going to get into meditation? No way. You know what I mean? And so if I don't do those things, then I'm not going to have a solid meditation in the morning. My meditation in the morning is some minutes of silence. I'm a quote guy, so I have some spiritual quotes that I have, and I put intention in that quote into meditation. I write gratitude list for the day. I have a couple guys I make some commitments to, you know, commitment to staying clean and sober, commitment of helping people, whatever my commitment is for the day. I do that, and then I go out and I do God's business. You know, I ask God, like this morning, I said, God, please allow me today to help somebody. Please allow me. Please use me today to help somebody. And I go out and do God's work. Practice step 12, God's work, man. Not just here in the fellowship, but like the lady that's struggling putting her groceries away in the parking lot. Like, go help her. You know what I mean? Open the door for someone. I still am making amends to the police department, right? I still say thank you for your service every time I see him, right? But it's not an amends anymore. It just turns into a way of life. The 9th step, right, is about marching orders. Everyone I made amends to, I asked them what are my marching orders are. They told me how to act different. I act that. That's a 12-step in action, right? That's how I live my life different. And so, yeah, 10, 11, and 12.
Excellent. Thank you, Pat. So this next question, I'm going to kind of break it up into a couple here, but I'm going to read it all together and then have you come to it. Yeah, it might be a little bit messy. So, and I wrote this down too. You mentioned that alcohol saved you when you wanted to jump. You know, you were restless, irritable, discontent. You took that half of tequila and everything calmed down, right? And then it went out of control. But here's the rest of this question from an anonymous attendee. I'm going through a divorce and have been struggling with my sobriety the last 10 months. During my legal proceedings and stressful negotiations, I sometimes feel like my acting out, and this guy must be a sex addict, acting out with porn is helping me to manage my emotions, as when I'm a couple of days sober, I can hardly manage, even though I'm on a break from work. I'm afraid that I'm going to act out and ruin my life, lose my kids and my job, and won't recover from those. Do you have any suggestions?
It sounds just like what I described with my with alcohol and drugs, you know? Like it's temporary. Like when I say it saved my life, it was a temporary relief, right? It was very temporary, and then the obsession, the phenomenon craving kicks in and I can't stop, right? And then consequences happen. The consequences for me in the beginning, right, weren't loss of you know, the physical things slowly, but for me, when that day when I was going to kill myself, right, that we're talking a spiritual bottom, when I've lost everything physically. Now, not everybody has to lose everything physically. I don't know what this person needs to lose in their life to make the decisions. I don't know. Like, you know, some people go to prison, some people go to jail, some people lose a wife. I heard a lady once, she burnt the toast, you know, and her house caught on fire, and that was enough for her, you know. whatever that is. I don't know when an individual's bottom was. If I knew when the bottoms were, I could be a rich man, you know. But like, so I don't know when that is for the individual. Um, but yeah, it gives me relief. Short period of time, it gives me relief, and eventually it stops working, right? And eventually it stops working. And so that day when I was going to commit suicide, right, and that thought was right, I literally was about to jump, like literally, like one, two, here we go, right, and it shifted me to the direction. I got the relief. I blacked out for 3 days. I don't know what happened in that 3 days time,
Yeah.
right?
So today, Pat, when you're restless, irritable, discontent, and you want to jump, whether it's literally or figuratively, how do you um, gain that serenity again? What's your process in those cases?
I think for me, the 12 steps of whatever fellowship you're in, right, is what saved my life. Like I know for when I was we'll just go to the bottom before I hit the spiritual bottom at 8 years sober. Like I was applying all these little tools, right? Like I was applying service, I was applying prayer, I was applying these little things, but it didn't give me, maybe it gave me relief for a little bit, right? But it didn't give me the freedom that I needed in order for me to move on in my life, right? The 12 steps, admitting complete defeat, and one, conceding to my innermost self that I'm fucked, you know, that I can no longer continue. And then seeking power, right? I can pray, but if I don't have a God in my life, right, I don't have that relationship or that connection, right? I can't make a decision in three, right? A decision to live a different life. I can say today's going to be different, Brad, but if I don't believe it inside, if I don't believe that I'm done and screwed, right? How am I going to be able to do four, to really look at the internal stuff, to then be honest with another human being in five? I don't have a God in my life, so I can't really like become willing to have the character defects removed, and then let alone ask him, my creator, I'm not willing to have, should have all of me good and bad, right? To then go back and make amends, right? So it all comes with that step one, right? That I'm powerless, right? That my life is completely unmanageable when I try to manage it, right? And that when I try to manage my life, right, the bedevilments, having trouble with personal relationships, can't control my emotional nature, prey to misery and depression, all that stuff, right? That's, I'm full flight living in that. I mean, I don't want to live in that, right? Like I got to finally surrender.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Pat. And I love how you dropped the phrase from the seventh step prayer in there. As a heads up to everybody, next week's speaker, the topic will be all of me, good and bad. So I'm grateful you dropped that in there. Nice, smooth transition to next week. We have another question, anonymous question from our audience. And this one kind of goes in a little bit different direction, but I think it's really important. When we live through what the big book says and we have a heart to serve in ways and make this stuff a part of our everyday lives, how do we reconcile making a living in things that are related to recovery and treatment, since the book says they're supposed to be separate? What are your thoughts on that?
Can you restate the question a little bit
Yeah,
different?
yeah. Let me. So here's how I understand it. The big book says, "Hey, we don't make a living off of doing this. How do we? How can? Oh shoot, I'm totally messing it up. How do I reconcile trying to make a living in things that are somewhat related to recovery and treatment when the book says they should be separate? Does that make sense? Better
Makes
sense?
perfect sense. Yeah. So it's
All
an
right.
eighth tradition issue, right? It's an eighth tradition issue. And just so, I mean, I don't usually share this because it's doesn't really, it's not the message of recovery in a 12-step fellowship, but because this is so open forum. I've worked in treatment my whole sobriety. I'm 22 years sober. I started working with adolescents when I was a year sober. I didn't plan on it. Like I was sponsoring a lot of young people, and this guy was like, "Hey, can you come hang out with my kids in my office?" And so I did. I went to this office and I started taking his kids to this group of kids. I started taking them to the beach, you know, have fun in recovery. Took them to the nooner. I'd read the big book with them, and then next thing you know, he's like, "Hey, I want you to go meet my friends up in LA." So I did. I went to go meet his friends. I was just taking the next indicated step. And I had shorts on and sandals, and I realized I was in a job interview for an outpatient treatment center for these kids that I'd been hanging out with. And I was like, "Oh man." So I took the job, you know, and then and then I started realizing you're getting paid for the same thing you do in like 12-step fellowship, and it was an eighth tradition issue, and so all I knew was 12-step recovery. So I had to go to school in order to be a professional, right? So that I can so I can be a professional and I can learn tools and skills that are not that. So I'm not treating these patients or clients with the recovery process. And so I did. I went to school, blah, 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 fast forward. But my mom, who worked in treatment for 38 years and died of 44 years sober, she told me, she said, if you're going to work in treatment, you need to double up your 12-step fellowship efforts, right? My work is not my recovery. My work that is paid for stuff is not the spiritual side of recovery. The spiritual side is us doing this for fun and for free. Right. And so that makes my life really, 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 really busy, because I double up my 12-step efforts in order for me to work within the industry that I do. But I want to really stress, I had to go to school to become a counselor, to be certified, to be licensed, so that I can be something other than a 12-step fellowship member. And where I live, there's a lot of treatment. And so like, a lot of guys become house managers and they make that first, and they stop going to 12-step fellowship and they relapse. And so it's a real fine line to walk. That's how I do it.
Yeah, follow up on that. From what you've experienced on all sides of recovery, and treatment and working these things, what can people in program do to better serve from the non-work side, from the service side? What can people do to better serve?
That's great. I think it's awesome. I think that there's a huge bridging the gap space. Like I know in our area, our meetings can be inundated with treatment, right? And so it becomes like the regular members can't hold the structure of the group, and it ends up becoming a group therapy session, right? So what we have done is we've created a bridging the gap committee. And so like our members of our group will ask like those treatment, like where you guys go to treatment, where do you go? And then we take in panels into the treatment center, and our panels are around 12-step meeting etiquette, right? How do we go to meetings, right? What is a sponsor? Because in the treatment, they're not teaching that kind of stuff. They're going to teach mental health. They're going to teach all the mental health stuff, which is great. It's good stuff to have, but they're not their house manager that has 6 months isn't going to know how don't have recovery in themselves enough. They're just doing their job and take them to the fellowship. So it becomes our responsibility as home group members to go into those, to at least make the effort to go into those institutions to be of service.
Thank you for sharing that. I love that process that you're instituting there. Another question, and then we'll start wrapping up here. You mentioned how grateful you were for those who came in H&I to see and do those programs while you were incarcerated. For those who may not understand or know what H&I is, can you share what that is, and then speak to the power of those programs?
That's great. So H&I is hospitals and institutions. Some of us make a joke and we say homies and inmates, but it's the 12-step fellowship takes panels into jails and institutions and hospitals. So for a long time, I took H&I panel into a maximum security into Chino prison with guys that were down for 25 to life sentences. And 3 of us would take a panel in there and we go tell our stories. The cool thing about there was that these guys had their own fellowship. They had their own sponsorship. These guys with 30 years were sponsoring guys with 5, and so we were just their speakers of their meeting. But some of those guys have gotten out, paroled and got out. I'm still in contact with them. So what happens is they were able to find the fellowship for when they got out. And those guys, 30 years sober, sponsoring a lot of guys, and they're getting out and they're excited. They've been down for 30 years. They don't know how to live life. And you get to carry the message and give hope where maybe in some of the most hopeless times. And for me, it was like, just get out of the cell, go hang out with these bozos, but when I was sitting there getting out of the cell, hanging out with those bozos, and they were telling me their story, there was glimmers within there where I was like, listen, I was like, what? And I was like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And then I had to remember that I was in jail and I couldn't let the homies see that I was relating. So oh yeah, talking. And then all of a sudden it was like a little another, oh yeah. And I would hear, right? The storytelling and the hearing, and I would go, uh-huh, maybe I'm an alcoholic. Uh-huh. Maybe I'm a drug addict. Oh no, you're not a drug addict, don't go follow it, don't get convinced, but it was, that's why I'm so grateful for this story. I've never heard my whole story all in one speaker tell my whole story, but I come and I listen to you and I go, uh-huh, you know what, Cheryl? Yeah, Cheryl, yeah. And Cheryl tells a little bit of my story, and then Vivian tells a little bit of my story, and then Jackie, and we all just continue to tell our stories, and we relate, and relating is so important. I felt so disconnected my whole life, and when I'm with you, I feel connected. So I appreciate you letting me tell my story today.
Love that. Do you have any final words of wisdom before we close out?
In the great words of Patty O, my mom, she said, if you don't drink, you won't get drunk. And if you don't get drunk, your life will get different. And so I carry on the legacy of my mom. So that's what I'm going to say. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Pat. Thank you so much for a fantastic RICO 12 weekly speaker meeting. If we missed your question here in the audience, or if you have more questions, please consider joining our WhatsApp community. I've put links in the chat here. You can also email me at RICO12pod, RECO12POD @gmail.com to join the conversation. If you haven't already, please consider rating and reviewing the podcast on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. It's a powerful way to work step 12. Next Friday, we will be hearing from Kahi W., another RICO 12 first-time speaker. And as I mentioned earlier, her topic will be all of me, good and bad. Stay tuned in the WhatsApp community on our email list for more information on that. Now, let's launch off into the rest of our day with the set-aside prayer that Pat will say for us.
Oh, great. I just like to I just hope that we can all set aside everything we think we know about life, of the program, of the steps. And God, I just ask that you just let us set aside everything we think about that we know about you. And I just ask that we allow us to have a new experience today of life, of the steps of the program, and of you. Amen.
Amen. Remember, everybody, there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find God now. Keep coming back. When you do, come all the way in, sit all the way down. Let's trudge this road of happy destiny together. Work it. You are worth it.
There was a man put his hand by the side of his mouth, and he wanted to scream, but the sound never came out. So he reached for the bottle to wash the pain away, 'cause what he wanted so badly was to live a different way. And all of his problems and all of his pain filled up the puddle and rose with the rain. His ship kept on sinking to the bottom of the lake, and he knew for certain that he was just a fake, just a fake. Was a man put his hand by the side of his mouth, and he wanted to share, but only lies ever came out. So he reached for the needle to numb the pain inside, problem. And all of his pain filled up the puddle, rose with the rain. The ship kept on sinking, bottom of the lake. He knew for certain that he was just a fake, just a side of his mouth as he read from the book, only truth spilled out. So he reached for a power to help him through the night. 'Cause what lives in the darkness dies in the light. Yeah, what lives in the darkness dies.